King Charles revealed a decision nobody saw coming: his abdication, and the transfer of the future crown path toward William and Catherine. Behind the ceremony, however, was a deeper story of duty, sacrifice, family pressure, and a monarchy forced to redefine itself. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles knew every person in that room understood the weight of what was coming. The British monarchy had carried centuries of tradition, and the throne represented more than a position. It represented continuity, national identity, and the promise that each generation would protect what came before. The decision announced that day would not simply change one life. It would reshape the future of the entire institution. William felt the pressure immediately as the future king. Catherine understood that her role would also transform, because the path ahead demanded strength, patience, and sacrifice. The announcement placed them at the center of a royal future order, the planned structure of roles and responsibilities guiding the monarchy's next chapter. And suddenly, preparation became reality. Charles had made the unthinkable choice. During his emotional royal address, he officially announced his abdication, meaning he was stepping away from the throne, and declared that William and Catherine would become the chosen successors to lead the monarchy into its next era. Before that moment, he sat alone with the burden of leaving behind the role he had spent his entire life preparing to serve. William received the news with shock, while Catherine faced the same overwhelming responsibility beside him. Their future was no longer distant. It had arrived without warning. A recorded conversation from the private family meeting later revealed the emotional struggle behind their reaction, showing how deeply the decision affected both of them. Charles's announcement raised questions that reached far beyond the speech itself. A documented account of the private discussions revealed the hidden pressures, personal fears, and difficult conversations that pushed the monarchy toward this historic change. The abdication was not the ending everyone expected. It was the beginning of a much larger emotional battle inside the royal family. The next challenge would reveal whether this sudden change could unite the family or expose divisions. But as the world tried to understand why the king had stepped aside, the focus quickly turned away from the throne itself, and toward the family members whose lives would be permanently changed by the decision. The world expected a royal announcement. Instead, it witnessed a moment that shook the very foundation of the monarchy. In an emotional address, King Charles revealed a decision nobody saw coming: his abdication, and the transfer of the future crown path toward William and Catherine. Behind the ceremony, however, was a deeper story of duty, sacrifice, family pressure, and a monarchy forced to redefine itself. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles knew every person in that room understood the weight of what was coming. The British monarchy had carried centuries of tradition, and the throne represented more than a position. It represented continuity, national identity, and the promise that each generation would protect what came before. The decision announced that day would not simply change one life. It would reshape the future of the entire institution. William felt the pressure immediately as the future king. Catherine understood that her role would also transform, because the path ahead demanded strength, patience, and sacrifice. The announcement placed them at the center of a royal future order, the planned structure of roles and responsibilities guiding the monarchy's next chapter. And suddenly, preparation became reality. Charles had made the unthinkable choice. During his emotional royal address, he officially announced his abdication, meaning he was stepping away from the throne, and declared that William and Catherine would become the chosen successors to lead the monarchy into its next era. Before that moment, he sat alone with the burden of leaving behind the role he had spent his entire life preparing to serve. William received the news with shock, while Catherine faced the same overwhelming responsibility beside him. Their future was no longer distant. It had arrived without warning. A recorded conversation from the private family meeting later revealed the emotional struggle behind their reaction, showing how deeply the decision affected both of them. Charles's announcement raised questions that reached far beyond the speech itself. A documented account of the private discussions revealed the hidden pressures, personal fears, and difficult conversations that pushed the monarchy toward this historic change. The abdication was not the ending everyone expected. It was the beginning of a much larger emotional battle inside the royal family. The next challenge would reveal whether this sudden change could unite the family or expose divisions. But as the world tried to understand why the king had stepped aside, the focus quickly turned away from the throne itself and toward the family members whose lives would be permanently changed by the decision. A crown does not only change the person who wears it, it changes every relationship surrounding it. As William and Catherine prepared for their unexpected future, every member of the royal family faced a different reality. For some, it represented hope and renewal. For others, it created painful questions about loyalty, position, and what would happen when the balance of royal power shifted forever. William had spent decades preparing for a future that was always expected to arrive one day, but nobody imagined it would arrive like this. The prince had trained for responsibility, studied the demands of leadership, and understood the weight of becoming monarch. Yet the sudden transition forced him to move from preparation into action, carrying the immediate responsibility of protecting the institution his family had served for generations. Catherine understood the same reality from a different perspective. Her future role as queen, the position held by the woman who stands beside the monarch and supports the duties of the crown, suddenly became more than a distant possibility. She knew public confidence would depend not only on William's decisions, but also on her ability to bring stability, compassion, and strength during a moment of uncertainty. William struggled privately with the speed of the change. In a recorded conversation from inside the family circle, he admitted that he feared disappointing both his father and the people who expected him to lead. The future king knew that accepting the crown meant accepting every criticism, every difficult choice, and every sacrifice that came with it. Catherine carried her own fears. She supported William, but she also understood that her personal life would never be the same again. The privacy she protected for her family would face new pressure, and the responsibilities placed on her would reach far beyond traditional royal appearances. The announcement also changed the emotions of those closest to the throne. Charles's decision created uncertainty among other members of the royal family, including those who had spent years understanding their place within the monarchy. A new order of importance was forming, and every relationship had to adjust to a different reality. Charles knew the hardest conversation was not the public speech. It was the private moment with William afterward. During a documented family account of their discussion, the monarch explained that the decision brought both relief and sadness. He felt peace, knowing the future was protected, but he also felt the pain of stepping away from the role that had defined his entire life. William listened carefully, understanding that his father's choice was not simply about leaving power behind. It was about placing the next generation at the center of history. But behind that emotional exchange was another unanswered question. The abdication had not appeared overnight. Something much earlier had started the chain of events that led them to this moment. The royal family now faced the consequences of the announcement, but behind the public smiles was a hidden chain of events that had pushed the monarchy toward this unforgettable turning point. Every royal decision has a beginning. Long before the abdication speech, there was one private moment that changed the direction of the monarchy. A conversation that was never meant to become public became the turning point that forced Charles to question the future. The event would later be remembered as the moment when the possibility of a different royal path became impossible to ignore. Charles carried the weight of the crown through years of expectations, tradition, and personal sacrifice. The role of monarch, the person who serves as the official head of the kingdom, demanded constant balance between protecting history and preparing for change. He understood that every decision would be judged not only by the present generation, but also by those who would inherit the institution afterward. William and Catherine had slowly become symbols of a changing monarchy. Their growing public responsibilities showed a different approach to royal duty, one focused on connection, modern expectations, and a closer relationship with the people. The future king knew his position was approaching, but neither he nor Catherine expected to come through such a dramatic emotional decision. The closed-door conversation changed everything. The Windsor future meeting became the moment that altered the direction of the royal family. After a major royal ceremony, Charles, William, and Catherine gathered privately to discuss the future. During that meeting, the monarch admitted for the first time that he was seriously considering stepping aside and allowing the next generation to take control sooner than anyone expected. Charles placed a handwritten note on the table and said nothing for several moments. A documented account of the private meeting revealed that he feared his decision would be misunderstood. He did not want his family to see it as surrender. He wanted them to understand that it was a sacrifice made to protect the future of the monarchy. William struggled with the revelation. The prince understood the responsibility waiting for him, but he also felt the emotional pain of watching his father consider leaving behind the role he had spent a lifetime preparing to fulfill. The future king wanted to honor the legacy built before him, while facing the reality that his own chapter was arriving much sooner. Catherine watched the tension between father and son grow. She understood that both men were carrying different forms of pain. Charles feared being remembered as someone who walked away, while William feared becoming the reason his father's era ended early. Their conversation revealed that this was not only about power, it was about family, identity, and the burden of duty. The Windsor future meeting became the hidden trigger that eventually led to the official abdication announcement. What began as a private discussion about possibilities slowly became the path toward a historic decision that would change the monarchy forever. But the hardest moments were still ahead. Once the private decision became unavoidable, the royal family would have to face each other directly and confront the future of the crown. The secret that began with one conversation was no longer hidden, and soon the people closest to the throne would have to face each other and decide what the monarchy would become. The hardest royal decisions are not made in front of cameras. They happen behind closed doors, where loyalty, fear, and love collide. Before the world accepted the new future of the monarchy, one final confrontation had to happen. The people involved were not simply discussing titles and tradition. They were facing the emotional cost of changing everything they had spent their lives protecting. Charles knew the private palace meeting would define more than his own future. The gathering brought together the people closest to the crown to discuss the consequences of his abdication and the responsibilities that would soon fall on William and Catherine. The monarchy depended on stability because the throne represented continuity, national confidence, and a promise that change would not destroy the traditions people trusted. William entered the conversation carrying a different kind of pressure. The prince understood that his future role as monarch, the person who represents the crown and carries the highest royal responsibility, was approaching faster than expected. He also knew that protecting the institution meant protecting his father's legacy, making the moment feel less like an opportunity and more like an emotional test. Charles struggled to hide the pain behind his decision. During a private conversation recorded in a fictional family account, the monarch admitted to William that stepping away had not been easy. He explained that leaving the throne was not a simple choice, because the crown had shaped his entire life. Every sacrifice, every duty, and every moment of preparation had led to that position. William listened carefully, but the future king could not ignore his own doubts. He questioned whether the transition was happening too soon, and whether he was truly ready to carry the responsibility his father had carried for years. The prince wanted to honor the path Charles created, but he also feared that accepting the crown meant accepting the end of his father's era. The tension between them reached its highest point when Charles explained the true reason behind his decision. The king told William that this was not about surrendering power or abandoning duty. It was about protecting the monarchy's future and ensuring that the institution remained strong for the next generation. Catherine understood that the conversation needed more than logic. She recognized the emotional battle happening between father and son. The princess became the bridge between them, reminding both men that the monarchy was not only built on titles and ceremonies, but also on trust, family, and sacrifice. Catherine's presence helped soften the moment, but it did not erase the difficult reality ahead. The family had reached an emotional understanding. Yet another struggle was already beginning beneath the surface. The question was no longer whether Charles would step aside. The question was, who would truly control the direction of the monarchy after he did? The family had reached an emotional agreement, but the next question was even more powerful. Who held the authority to shape the monarchy after Charles stepped away? A throne may belong to one person, but the future of a monarchy depends on many hands. Behind Charles's emotional announcement was a complicated network of decisions, traditions, and personal choices. The question was no longer only why the king stepped away. The deeper mystery was who guided the final decision, and who carried the responsibility of protecting the institution afterward. Charles understood that succession was never only about replacing one person with another. The royal structure surrounding succession, the planned system that determines how leadership moves from one generation to the next, required careful preparation because the monarchy represented stability, history, and national identity. One wrong step could create uncertainty at the very moment the institution needed confidence. William and Catherine had already become central figures in shaping that future. Their growing influence came from years of public responsibility, charity work, and a changing relationship between the monarchy and the people. The prince knew that becoming the future leader meant more than receiving a title. It meant carrying the hopes and expectations of millions who wanted a modern but dependable royal family. Charles carried a different burden. The monarch spent quiet moments questioning how history would remember his choice. In a documented personal account of his reflections, he admitted that his greatest fear was not losing the throne, but being misunderstood. He wanted people to see the decision as an act of responsibility rather than a retreat from duty. William felt the pressure building around him. The future king knew that every decision would now be judged differently, because the attention of the monarchy was shifting toward him. He respected what Charles had built, but he also understood that stepping forward meant accepting criticism, difficult choices, and the possibility of disappointing those who expected perfection. Catherine became one of the most important voices during this uncertain period. In a private conversation, later described through a recorded family account, Charles told her that the future of the monarchy depended on trust, not tradition alone. The king explained that customs could preserve history, but only genuine connection could protect the institution in a changing world. Catherine understood the meaning behind those words. She recognized that the transition was not simply about changing who sat at the center of the royal family. It was about reshaping how the monarchy would survive. The princess supported the decision because she believed the future required both respect for the past and courage to move forward. The announcement changed the balance of influence inside the royal family. Charles remained a figure of experience and guidance, while William and Catherine moved closer to the center of responsibility. The shift created a new dynamic, where loyalty, wisdom, and leadership had to exist together. But the palace had not yet felt the full impact of the decision. Once the transition became official, emotions would spread beyond private conversations, and every person connected to the crown would have to face what this new reality truly meant. The decision had been made, but a new reality was beginning, and everyone inside the royal circle would soon discover what the change truly meant. When history changes, the first moments afterward reveal the truth. Behind the official announcements and public ceremonies were private reactions filled with uncertainty. The royal family was no longer preparing for a distant future. They were living inside it. Every conversation, every responsibility, and every relationship had been altered by one decision that moved the monarchy into an entirely new chapter. William felt the weight of the new reality immediately. The prince was no longer simply preparing for a future role that might arrive years later. He was now carrying the expectations of leadership after Charles's decision to step aside. The transition period became a critical moment because the monarchy depended on a smooth transfer of responsibility, protecting both public confidence and the thrived for generations. Catherine understood the pressure surrounding them. The princess knew that her role would expand alongside William's, and that the future of the royal family would depend on how they handled this unexpected change. Palace operations began adjusting to the new royal structure. The organized system of duties, responsibilities, and official roles that keeps the monarchy functioning, as everyone prepared for a different era. William received his first major briefing as future monarch, with a mixture of determination and uncertainty. The future king listened carefully as the responsibilities ahead were explained. But privately, he struggled with the speed of the transformation. He understood the honor, yet he also felt the enormous weight of replacing a father who had spent decades preparing for that exact position. Catherine saw the emotional burden behind William's confidence. In a private conversation described through a recorded family account, she comforted him and reminded him that leadership was not about appearing fearless. She told the prince that accepting responsibility did not mean carrying every fear alone. Her support became one of the strongest foundations during the difficult transition. Charles experienced his own quiet moment of reflection after officially stepping away. The king, who had dedicated his life to serving the crown, felt a complicated mixture of relief and sadness. A documented personal account revealed that the monarch understood the decision had protected the future, but he still felt the emotional loss of leaving behind a role that had shaped his identity. The family began to recognize that the monarchy was entering a different era. Charles remained a source of experience and guidance, while William and Catherine became the figures expected to lead the next chapter. The change was not only about power moving forward, it was about a new generation carrying the responsibility of preserving something much older than themselves. But the greatest transformation was still waiting. It would not happen through announcements, ceremonies, or public appearances. It would come through a private moment that would force William to understand what leadership truly demanded from him. The world saw a new royal structure forming, but the true meaning of the transition would only become clear when William and Catherine faced the emotional reality of their new destiny. The greatest royal moments are not always the loudest ones. Sometimes the future changes in silence, during a private conversation between two people carrying impossible expectations. After the shock of Charles's decision faded, William and Catherine faced the question that mattered most. Could they truly become the leaders the monarchy needed? William knew the next chapter would demand more than ceremonies and public appearances. The prince had spent years preparing for responsibility, but accepting the reality of leadership was different from imagining it. The weight of the crown meant protecting traditions, guiding the nation through uncertainty, and proving that the monarchy could survive a sudden change at its highest level. Catherine understood that their challenge was not only political but deeply personal. Her expanded role as future queen, the position of the woman expected to support the monarch and represent the values of the crown, required patience, compassion, and strength. The princess recognized that this moment represented a generational change, where the monarchy needed to connect with a new era while still respecting the history behind it. William struggled with the emotional side of the transition. In a recorded private conversation shared through a fictional family account, He admitted that replacing his father earlier than expected felt overwhelming. The future king respected the years Charles had given to the monarchy and feared that moving forward too quickly could appear as if he was ending his father's legacy instead of continuing it. Catherine listened as William expressed those fears. She reminded the prince that leadership was not measured only by tradition or authority. It was measured by understanding people, showing compassion, and making difficult choices with honesty. Her words gave him a different perspective, helping him realize that becoming monarch was not about copying the past, but carrying its lessons forward. Charles knew his son needed one final piece of guidance. During a private conversation later described in a documented family account, the king told William that protecting the crown required more than preserving old customs. He explained that the monarchy survived because each generation adapted while respecting those who came before. William carried those words with him. The prince began to understand that the future of the monarchy depended on balance. History could not be ignored, but change could not be feared. The crown needed someone willing to protect its meaning while allowing it to evolve. Catherine remained beside him as the family prepared for the world's reaction. She knew the transformation ahead would test their strength, but she also believed the moment could create a new connection between the monarchy and the people it served. The decision that began inside palace walls was about to become a global event, as millions watched and decided what this new monarchy represented. A royal decision becomes history when the world reacts. After Charles announced his abdication and William and Catherine's future roles became clear, the monarchy faced its greatest public test. Supporters, critics, and observers all searched for meaning in a moment that changed centuries of tradition. The question was no longer what happened inside the palace. It was what this moment meant to everyone outside it. William felt the weight of global attention almost immediately. The prince was no longer viewed only as the next generation waiting patiently for his turn. He had become the symbol of a new royal future, one shaped by change, responsibility, and the expectation that the monarchy could move forward without losing its connection to the past. Catherine understood the importance of the public reaction. The princess knew that the transition mattered because the monarchy depended on trust from the people. For generations, royal stability had been built through continuity, and now millions were watching to see whether this unexpected change would strengthen the institution or create uncertainty. The announcement created a powerful emotional divide. Some supporters mourned Charles stepping away from the role he had spent his life preparing for, while others welcomed the arrival of a younger generation. The king remained a respected figure for many who believed his service deserved recognition, yet the excitement surrounding William and Catherine showed that many were ready for a different chapter. Crowds gathered near Buckingham Palace, the official royal residence and a historic center for major royal events, to express their feelings about the transition. Some people arrived with messages of gratitude for Charles, while others celebrated the future represented by William and Catherine. The moment revealed that the monarchy was no longer facing a private family change. It had become a national conversation. The newspapers captured the scale of the reaction. One major British publication released a dramatic front page declaring, "The day the crown changed," a phrase that reflected the shock felt across the country. The headline transformed the abdication from a royal announcement into a defining public moment that people would remember for years. William watched the reaction carefully. A documented account of the early transition period revealed that the future king understood the challenge ahead. Public support could not simply be inherited with a title. It had to be earned through actions, decisions, and the way he and Catherine carried their new responsibilities. Catherine also recognized that the world was judging more than a change in leadership. People were deciding whether this new era represented renewal or uncertainty. The reaction showed that the monarchy had entered a completely different chapter, where tradition and adaptation would have to exist together. But as the noise of the world began to settle, One final question remained. History would decide whether Charles's choice was remembered as a moment of retreat or the decision that protected the future of the crown. The noise of the world began to settle, leaving behind the final question. How would history remember the choice that changed the monarchy forever? Every era of the monarchy is defined by moments of impossible choices. Charles's abdication was not simply the end of one reign. It was the beginning of a different vision for the future. After the shock, the questions, and the emotional battles, the royal family reached a final reality. The crown had changed hands in spirit, before it ever changed hands in ceremony. Charles carried the memory of that decision with both pride and pain. The king had spent his life preparing to serve, understanding that the monarchy represented more than one person's ambition. It represented continuity, responsibility, and a connection between generations. His choice to step away became a powerful statement that protecting the institution mattered more than holding on to personal position. William accepted that his new path would not be defined by celebration alone. The prince understood that becoming the future leader of the monarchy was not a reward for waiting patiently. It was a responsibility created by difficult circumstances. The crown required sacrifice, discipline, and the ability to make choices that would affect not only his family, but the entire institution. Catherine stood beside William as the monarchy entered its new chapter. The princess became a symbol of stability during a moment filled with uncertainty. Her role mattered, because the future of the royal family depended not only on authority, but also on trust, empathy, and the ability to connect with people who were watching every step of the transition. Charles reflected on what he was leaving behind. In a documented personal account of his final thoughts as monarch, he admitted that the hardest part was not giving up power. It was accepting that a chapter of his life had ended. The king had spent decades preparing for the crown, and walking away required a level of courage that few people could understand. William faced his own emotional struggle. The future king knew that continuing his father's legacy meant more than preserving old traditions. It meant adapting, listening, and proving that the monarchy could survive in a changing world. He understood that leadership was not about inheriting a position. It was about earning the trust placed upon him. Catherine helped guide the family through the uncertainty. Her presence represented balance during a moment when emotions could have overwhelmed decisions. The princess understood that the monarchy's strength came from unity, and she helped create a sense of calm as the institution moved toward its next era. The true meaning of Charles's abdication became clear with time. It was not a sign of weakness. It was a decision built around protecting continuity and ensuring that the monarchy could move forward without losing its foundation. The king chose transition over personal ambition, placing the future above himself. William and Catherine's rise represented more than a change of leadership. It represented a new relationship between the monarchy and the people. The family chose adaptation over resistance, unity over division, and the future over remaining trapped by tradition.